Hi, I'm Bill Bradley. Join me for a recent excerpt of American Voices. I'm Bill Bradley. We're back now on American Voices on Sirius XM. In 2010, archaeologists discovered a Revolutionary War-era gunboat. It was found at the site of the World Trade Center. Experts believe the gunboat was built in the 1700s and that it helped defend the Delaware River before the ship was likely captured by the British. The gunboat is being restored right now. In fact, you can currently watch experts working on this process, putting it all together at the New York State Museum in Albany, New York. Well, joining me now to tell us more about the gunboat and its history is Dr. Michael Lucas. He's the curator of historical archaeology at the museum, and he gives tours of this ship restoration. Dr. Lucas, welcome to American Voices.
Thank you so much for having me.
So before we talk about the gunboat, let's hear a little about your background. As a kid, what got you interested in archaeology?
Well, I grew up on a farm out in Nebraska. So as a kid, part of our farmland, there was a Native American encampment on one of our pieces of farmland. So when we'd go out and work the fields, disking or working the soil, there'd be flakes and things like that on the surface. So I really got interested in it just as a curiosity about the past. And I was always walking through the stream beds looking for fossils and things like that. So I always had a fascination with that sort of discovery. So that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I always wanted to do. I had a subscription to National Geographic when I was a kid, and I remember reading about a site called the Coster site, which is a real famous archaeological site. It's an indigenous site in southern Illinois, and it's a really deeply buried site. So it really caught my fascination how you can dig down through the soil and be digging down through thousands of years of history, and how you can reconstruct past lives through archaeology. So that's how I got interested. And then when I went off to school, I knew what I was going to study.
Did you actually work in the fields?
Yeah. So, we had a small farm. I think when I was a kid, it was around 300 and some acres, and my parents actually still live on that farm, and I think they have around 400 acres now. So yeah, I would work the ground, and for plant, Dad would usually plant, and then we'd harvest, and I did chores with the livestock and so on. So that's how I grew up.
So now you're the curator of historical archaeology at the New York State Museum in Albany. Let's talk about that Revolutionary War era gunboat. What do we know about how it was discovered?
It was discovered in 2010 when they were excavating for the Vehicular Security Center. And this was about a block south of where the South Tower once stood.
You mean the South World Trade Center?
Yeah. Yes, the World Trade Center. So after the tragedy of 9/11, and they were reconstructing the area down there, this was one of the buildings that they were constructing. So they were digging down through the soil for the foundation of this building. And here again, this was one of these projects where archaeology was required. So there were professional archaeologists from a contract firm called AKRF that were down on site monitoring the construction. And about 22 feet below the surface of Manhattan, they found this ship. So they recognized that it was shipped. They stopped the construction, which is no easy task in downtown Manhattan, as you can imagine. And they were given about 2 weeks to develop a research design, a plan of action, and then about a week to remove the remnants of this ship.
How'd they go about identifying what it was? I mean, what era it was from?
They knew it by the construction, the way that the ship was built. They could tell it was probably like an 18th century boat. But while they were doing the excavations, they really didn't know what kind of a ship it was. They kind of had a general idea of the time period, but they weren't sure. That would happen later when it actually went to conservation. But I should mention I should mention one more thing about this. And the reason why a lot of people ask, well, why is it, what's a ship doing 22 feet below the surface, the street level in Manhattan? And the reason it was down there was because a lot of Manhattan is made land.
Is what land?
It's like it's made land, so it's actually landfill. So it's like any city, like Boston is the same way. When the population got large enough, they had to find more land. So what they had to do is actually make it. So they extended into the Hudson River. So at one time, this boat would have been on the shore of the Hudson River, and
Hmm.
they put 22 feet of fill on top of the ship starting around the 1790s.
Hmm.
Probably idea that most people have is that, okay, we got the streets of Manhattan, it's ground that's always been there. But when you tell them that this ship was actually found underneath there, they're really kind of shocked. It's like, oh, I didn't realize that was all made land. That was all landfill.
Well, I didn't realize that. I mean,
Yeah,
until this
so
interview.
it's a lot of that. What you find when they do these excavations, they'll find these square structures called cribbing. That's actually, it looks like Lincoln logs. And that's another thing you can tell kids. Although I don't know if kids really play with Lincoln logs these days, but if you tell them, like, how a log cabin is built, imagine that in a much larger scale, and then they fill that up, these cribbing structures, or in this case, a ship, and you fill it up with debris, and then you have a surface that is somewhat stable.
Well, so how much of Manhattan is made land?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know the percentage wise. I can tell you this, like, if you so where the Freedom Tower is, Freedom Plaza there, the park.
Hmm.
If you go to the Hudson River, it's a quarter of a mile to the Hudson River from there. So that's all made land. So you have a
Hmm.
quarter of a mile on that side that's made land from, the 1790s on. So
Yeah,
that gives you some idea. I mean, several blocks. Yeah,
really interesting.
yeah.
You know, what else we know so far about the gunboat, its use, or any other history of the ship?
So after they removed the ship from the ground down in Manhattan, they sent it down to a lab in Maryland where they did a little bit of triage, and they cleaned off the timbers, and then they sent it to Texas A&M. So all the timbers were at Texas A&M.
Went from New York City to Texas A&M?
Yeah, so Texas A&M they have a conservation lab. They have one of the largest, in fact, it is the largest freeze dryer in the Western Hemisphere. So they can use that to sort of dry out the wood.
Huh.
They're experts in ship conservation. So they sent the timbers down there in 2011, and then they started doing research on, what this thing was. And the way that they started piecing this together was, first of all, they had to figure out what was the shape of the ship, because they'd just taken it apart, and of course it was flat from being under all this soil. So you really didn't know how deep the vessel was just by looking at it as it sat in the ground. So they started making a model to approximate the ship. They scanned all the timbers, and they realized by the shape of the ship and the depth of the hold, the length, and then the width of the ship, it really fit the profile of a gunboat.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of different pieces of information that sort of stack up in support of this. One of the things that they didn't expect when they got the timbers, they didn't expect there would be so much metal in them. So this was almost an entirely iron fast ship. So this was put together basically with spikes, iron
Hmm.
spikes. As you can imagine, there's a problem when you put a wooden ship out in the water with iron fastenings. It's going to break down pretty quick. The iron is going to start to break down with the water, and the ship isn't going to really last very long. So why would you do that? Ships are normally built with wooden pegs, so you don't have that problem because it's going to last longer. But that takes a long time to build. So this was something that, if you want to build a ship really quick, you can use metal fastenings. In the case of gunboats, the other ones that we know about, one of them is at the bottom of Lake Champlain called the Spitfire, and another one is at the Smithsonian Institution in the American History Museum in Washington, D.C., and that's called the Philadelphia. And those were also iron fastened. So
Hmm.
this resembles them identically in terms of the way that they were put together. So there was no Navy in the 1770s when we think this ship was, well, when we know this ship was built. And so if you want to put something together really quickly, you can use iron fastenings. So that
Hmm.
was another important piece of information.
So, what's still a mystery about the ship? I mean, you discovered all these things. I mean, what are you still trying to find out about the ship?
Well, anytime you try to understand something about the past, there's always a lot of gaps. So the preponderance of evidence with the shape of the ship, the way it was constructed, the artifacts that were found. So there were also munitions. There was a cannonball. There was a British military button. All these things point to a military vessel. But you can line the physical information up with the historical record and try to create a narrative that works or that fits, but you don't have
Hmm.
there's not a document saying that there was a ship, at least not that's been found, that
Right.
there was a ship that was sunk right here. So it's there's still a lot of mystery. So if you look at it, the mystery period here is 1775 to 1790. So in 1775, we know the ship was built after 1773. A lab did the analysis on the tree rings. You can do tree ring dating. It's called
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
dendrochronology. And so they were able to date the last timber, the last one that was felled around 17. Well, it was felled after 1773
Hmm.
or after.
And they can tell that from the rings in the wood.
Yes,
Amazing.
this is something we do on tours. We tell kids because they can understand. Well, how do you know? Like, what happened? What do tree rings represent on a tree? Well, they understand that that tells you how old the tree was. But you can also build sequences of these tree rings like through time. So you can see, okay, and say in 1820 or 1720, it was a really wet year in one part of the country versus a dry year in another part of the country. So you can not only find out what year these rings represent, but you can also figure out where they represent. So in this case, the tree ring sequence that they found in the white oak timbers match precisely with the sequence down near Philadelphia. So we know that the ship was built after 1773 in the Philadelphia area, probably on the New Jersey side. We know from the historical record that they built a series of gunboats, 13 and maybe 14 gunboats, for the defense of Philadelphia after Bunker Hill. The Americans didn't have a navy, so they had to build something quick. So between July and September, they built these 13 or 14 gunboats,
Hmm.
and this was quite possibly one of those. It fits the descriptions in the record by size, by the munitions that were
Hmm.
found.
Interesting.
So yeah, so it's quite remarkable. And then so it's an American gunboat, right? And so you've got a British military button on it.
A British what?
A British military button. So there's a military button that was found in the bottom of this boat. It's got a 52 on it, which stands for the British 52nd Regiment of Foot. So, how does this British military button get on what we surmise is an American built gunboat? Well, the theory is that this was probably captured when the British captured Philadelphia in 1777. This is probably when
Hmm.
this ship fell into British hands.
Hmm.
And we know that the 52nd was in the area. And then after that, at some point, it made its way to New York.
Hmm.
So there are all these pieces of information. It made its way down south. It ended up in New York. So it's that period. And then we know from the landfill, we know the landfill started in 1790. So it's that period between 1775, when we know it was built and where it was built, to 1790, this 15-year period that really that's still largely a mystery.
Hmm. So, what are we trying to find out still?
So if we could find a reference, say maybe in in some New York newspaper or in some papers somewhere saying that there was a ship that was laying on the edge of the Hudson River. That would supply more data. The other thing is, from the artifacts that we find, so there were around 7,000 artifacts associated with this ship,
Hmm.
but they're not all directly associated with the ship. So a lot of them are probably landfill. So when they put the landfill in, a lot of the artifacts were on top of the ship, right? But the artifacts that are down within the ribs of the ship are the ones that are directly associated with the ship. So there's a few hundred of those. And those are really interesting in that you can start to piece together the lives of the sailors that were on the ship, whether they be American or British.
Yeah, but I want to take just one example.
Mhm.
Let's take one artifact, say a spoon.
Uh-huh.
They found it on the ship. Okay, how do you analyze that in a lab?
Yeah, so that's a really good example. There were a couple of spoons. Sometimes you find on ships, in particular shipwrecks and battle sites, you'll find a spoon in it. Sometimes they'll have initials carved in them. So if you look closely, you might see a soldier or a sailor's initial carved in them. And so when those things come out of the ground, usually what you'll see is a lot of times they'll be rusty or they'll have surface material on them. So they have to be conserved. And so all that rust or surface debris has to be taken off. And then you can really get an idea of what the thing looked like below. You can x-ray something like a spoon. You can x-ray it and get some detail from it. But we just got one of the spoons back. It's down in conservation down in Maryland right now. We just got an image from it yesterday. So this is brand new data. And there is a type of imaging that you can do that will take multiple pictures from different angles and estimate the light source from different angles so you can really see the detail on these things. And we were able to get the detail off the top of the spoon, and it's actually a sword, which is pretty unusual. So it
Interesting.
seems it seems pretty coincidental that this is on what we're hypothesizing is definitely a military ship, that you have this spoon handle that has a sword on it. I've never seen one like this.
Well, so what does it imply to you?
So it could be a maybe it's a military issued spoon. I looked through the collections yesterday of some of the other military sites we have in Fort Ticonderoga, which of course was a French fort, but then the British took over this fort. We have spoon handles from that. And one of them is an identical match for this one that was found on the World Trade Center ship. So, so that's good evidence right there. It's the right time period. It's when the British were occupying. So this could be a British spoon.
Well, Dr. Lucas, I want to thank you for being here and sharing some of the fascinating parts of American history that you're discovering.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's been a great pleasure to be invited to talk, and I really appreciate it.
I've been speaking with Dr. Michael Lucas. He's the curator of historical archaeology at the New York State Museum in Albany, New York. To find out more, visit us on Facebook. Our Facebook page is American Voices with Senator Bill Bradley. On Instagram, it's Bill Bradley on Sirius XM. Thank you for listening to American Voices here on my YouTube channel. For more interviews celebrating the goodness and creativity of the American people, click the subscribe button below.